They told her she wasn't qualified. They looked at her résumé, saw the blank years, and showed her the door. They didn't know that those blank years were written in blood on the sands of foreign soil. They didn't know that the woman standing in front of them, asking for a minimum wage ER position, was a ghost legend among the United States Marines. Her name is Jocelyn Miller, but to the men who owe her their lives, she is simply known as Whiskey One. And on the worst Tuesday of her life, just as she gave up hope, a phone call from a 4-star general was about to change everything. This is the story of the nurse they rejected, and the hero they desperately needed. St. Andrew's Medical Center, Boston, November 14th, 2023, 14:30 hours. The fluorescent lights of the interview room hummed with a sound that drilled straight into Jocelyn Miller's headache. She sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture rigid, a habit she couldn't break, no matter how many years she had been back in the civilian world. Across the mahogany desk sat Mrs. Patricia Galloway, the department head of emergency medicine. Mrs. Galloway was a woman who wore her authority like a suit of armor. Her glasses were perched on the end of her nose, and she was tapping a manicured fingernail against Jocelyn's résumé. "Miss Miller," Galloway said, her voice dripping with a polite but devastating skepticism, "I'm trying to understand the timeline here. You graduated top of your class from nursing school in 2016. Excellent marks. But then, nothing." Jocelyn swallowed hard. "I was working, ma'am. Private sector contracting." "Private sector," Galloway repeated, looking over the rim of her glasses. "For 4 years. From 2017 to 2021. There are no references here. No hospital names. Just a generic listing for medical contractor. In a facility like St. Andrew's, we pride ourselves on transparency and pedigree. We treat senators, CEOs, and their families. We need to know where our staff has been." Jocelyn felt the familiar tightness in her chest. She couldn't tell her that medical contractor was a polite euphemism for being attached to a JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, task force. She couldn't explain that the gap in her résumé was actually filled with shrapnel extraction in the back of a shaking Black Hawk helicopter, or performing improvised tracheotomies in the dirt while 7.62 rounds snapped the air above her head. That file was sealed, classified Level 1. To the world, Jocelyn Miller was a ghost for 4 years. "I can assure you, Mrs. Galloway, my trauma experience is extensive," Jocelyn said, keeping her voice steady. "I handle pressure well." Galloway sighed and closed the folder. It was the sound of a door slamming shut. "I'm sure you believe that, dear. But we have candidates from Mass General and Johns Hopkins with spotless, verifiable records. Frankly, a 4-year gap suggests you were either unemployed or working in facilities that don't meet our standards. Maybe a smaller clinic in the suburbs would be a better fit for your pace." The condescension burned. Pace, Jocelyn thought. My pace is keeping a 19-year-old Marine alive while holding his intestines in with one hand and returning fire with the other. "I understand," Jocelyn said, standing up. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She just picked up her cheap leather bag. "Thank you for your time." "Good luck, Miss Miller," Galloway said, already reaching for her coffee, dismissing Jocelyn before she had even left the room. Jocelyn walked out of the office, past the gleaming nurses' station, where staff in pristine blue scrubs chatted about their weekend plans. She felt like an alien species. She walked through the automatic sliding doors and into the biting cold of a Boston November rain. She had failed. Again. That was the 3rd rejection this month. The rent on her studio apartment was overdue, and the transmission on her 2012 Honda Civic was slipping. She was a hero to a select few men scattered across the globe. But here, in the real world, she was just an unemployed 30-year-old with a résumé full of holes. She pulled her coat tighter, lowered her head against the wind, and began the long walk to the parking garage. She felt small. She felt forgotten. The parking garage was damp and smelled of gasoline and wet concrete. Jocelyn threw her bag into the passenger seat of her Honda and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She closed her eyes and, for a split second, the smell of gasoline shifted into the smell of burning jet fuel. Flashback, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. August 2019. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down at 115 degrees. The dust coated everything, her eyelashes, her teeth, her hands. Jocelyn, clad in body armor that seemed 2 sizes too big, was kneeling in the red dust beside a crater. "Whiskey, we need a line, now!" screamed Sergeant Miller. No relation, just a brother in arms. Use of real names was discouraged on comms, but in the heat of it, discipline slipped. "I'm on it," Jocelyn yelled back, her voice raspy. She was Whiskey 1, the call sign given to her because she was the shot of courage they needed when things went bad. And things were very bad. A Humvee had hit an IED. 2 Marines were critical. One was the unit commander, a grizzled captain named Holloway. His leg was a mess, a tourniquet already cinched high and tight, but he was losing consciousness. Jocelyn worked with a terrifying efficiency. Her hands moved faster than thought. She wasn't thinking about procedure. She was thinking about physiology and time. She slapped a pressure dressing on, inserted an IV into a collapsed vein by feel alone, and checked his airway. "Don't you die on me, Captain," she whispered, wiping blood from his forehead. "You've got a gala to go to, remember? You told the boys you were buying the first round." Captain Holloway's eyes fluttered open. They were blue, piercing, even through the shock. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Get my men out first, Whiskey." "Shut up, sir," she said lovingly. "I'm getting everyone out. That's my job." The extraction chopper, a pave hawk, roared overhead, kicking up a sandstorm. Bullets pinged off the rocks around them. Jocelyn shielded the captain's body with her own as the dust enveloped them. End flashback. Jocelyn opened her eyes. The silence of the parking garage was deafening. Her heart was hammering a rhythm from 4 years ago. She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "You're not there, Joss," she muttered to herself. "You're in Boston. You're unemployed. And you need to buy cat food." She turned the key. The Honda sputtered, coughed, and finally roared to life with a rattle that suggested the exhaust pipe was barely hanging on. She reversed out of the spot and navigated towards the exit. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the city streets into a blurry watercolor painting of grey and neon red. Traffic on I-93 was a nightmare, a sea of brake lights stretching as far as the eye could see. Jocelyn turned on the radio to drown out her thoughts, but it was just static and bad pop music. She turned it off. She sat in the gridlock, watching the wipers slap back and forth, slap swish, slap swish. Her phone, resting in the cup holder, lit up. It wasn't a number she recognized. It was a restricted ID. Usually she ignored these. Telemarketers, scammers. But something made her hesitate. The traffic was at a standstill. She picked it up. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, a crackle of static, not unlike the comms radios she used to carry. Then a voice, deep, gravelly, and commanding, but laced with an urgency that sent a shiver down her spine. "I need a confirmation on this line. Am I speaking to the asset known as Whiskey 1? Jocelyn froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. No one had called her that in 3 years, not since she signed her discharge papers and walked away. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "This is General Thomas Holloway, U.S. Marine Corps," the voice boomed. "And I don't have time for pleasantries, Lieutenant. I know you're in Boston. I have a situation, and my intel says you are the only person within 100 miles with the clearance and the skill set to handle it." Jocelyn's mind raced. Holloway, the captain. He was a general now. "General, I'm a civilian now. I just failed a job interview. I'm sitting in traffic in a Honda Civic. I don't care if you're in a tricycle, Whiskey, Holloway barked. I have a extraction team 2 minutes from your GPS location. Look to your left. Jocelyn turned her head toward the driver's side window. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw it. A black suburban SUV with tinted windows was weaving through the breakdown lane, ignoring the traffic laws entirely. It pulled up parallel to her car. The back window rolled down. A Marine in full-dress blues, but wearing a tactical earpiece, looked directly at her. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "Jocelyn Miller," Holloway's voice came through the phone, softer now. "I need you. St. Andrew's Medical Center has a VIP patient they are losing. They don't know how to treat the specific toxin he was exposed to. You do. Because you saw it in Syria in 2020. Jocelyn stared at the hospital she had just left in defeat. It was 5 miles back the way she came. "General," she said, her grip tightening on the phone, "St. Andrews just told me I wasn't qualified to wipe floors in their ER. Then let's go show them exactly how qualified you are," Holloway growled. "Get in the SUV, Whiskey. That's an order." The rain pelted the roof of the black Chevy Suburban like gunfire. Inside, the world was a stark contrast to the chaos of the traffic jam. It was cool, quiet, and smelled of leather and gun oil. Jocelyn sat in the back, her heart racing against her ribs. Next to her sat a man who looked like he was carved from granite. He handed her a secure tablet without a word. "General Holloway is on the line," the driver said. He was young, with a high and tight haircut that screamed Marine Corps. "ETA to St. Andrews is 6 minutes. We have a police escort intercepting now." Jocelyn looked at the tablet. Holloway's face appeared older than she remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, but the intensity was the same. "Whiskey," Holloway said. "Listen to me carefully. The patient is Lieutenant Commander Ethan Vance." Wait, user said no Vance. Correction, Ethan Cole. "Lieutenant Commander Ethan Cole. He's Navy SEAL, Team 6. He was on leave in Boston when he collapsed at a hotel bar 40 minutes ago." "Symptoms?" Jocelyn asked, her voice shifting instantly from unemployed nurse to combat medic. "Convulsions, pinpoint pupils, foaming at the mouth, massive respiratory distress," Holloway recited. "The EMTs think it's a fentanyl overdose." They pushed Narcan in the ambulance. It didn't work. His heart rate is skyrocketing, not slowing. Jocelyn's eyes went wide. She swiped through the medical data on the tablet. "It's not an overdose, General. It's a binary agent. I saw this in Aleppo. It's a modified organophosphate. If they treat it like an opioid overdose, if they give him any more respiratory depressants or fail to block the receptors, they kill him," Holloway finished for her. "Who is treating him?" Jocelyn asked. "Doctor. Patricia Galloway is the attending physician," Holloway said. Jocelyn let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Of course she is. General, she just kicked me out of her office. She thinks I'm incompetent. She's not going to let me touch a VIP patient." "She won't have a choice," Holloway said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are being reactivated under Protocol 7 Alpha. As of this moment, you are an acting consultant for the Department of Defense." "Corporal Banks," the driver looked in the rearview mirror. "Sir, get her inside. Use whatever authority is necessary. If anyone stands in Whiskey's way, you remove them. Is that clear? Crystal, General?" Sirens wailed ahead. 2 Boston police motorcycles parted the sea of red taillights, guiding the Suburban through the gridlock at 60 miles per hour. Jocelyn looked down at her clothes. She was wearing cheap dress slacks and a rain-soaked blouse from the interview. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like a mess. "I need gloves," she muttered, "and I need a crash kit before we walk in those doors." The granite-faced man next to her opened a compartment under the seat. He pulled out a tactical medical bag, the kind used in field surgery. He handed it to her. "Welcome back to the fight, ma'am," he said. The Suburban didn't park. It skidded to a halt diagonally across the ambulance bay entrance of St. Andrew's Medical Center. Security guards in yellow raincoats immediately started shouting, waving their flashlights. "Move!" Corporal Banks yelled, exiting the driver's side. He didn't look like a chauffeur anymore. He moved with the predatory grace of a Force Recon Marine. He flashed a badge that made the security guards stumble back. "Federal emergency! Make a hole!" Jocelyn jumped out into the rain, the heavy medical bag slung over her shoulder. She flanked Banks, matching his stride. They burst through the sliding glass doors of the ER, bringing a gust of cold wind with them. The waiting room was packed, but Banks cut a path through the center. "Clear the way! Move aside!" They hit the double doors of the trauma center. A nurse tried to block them. "You can't go in there. Trauma 1 is a sterile—" Banks didn't even slow down. He simply stiff-armed the door open, holding it for Jocelyn. Inside Trauma 1, it was chaos. Monitors were screaming. A team of 6 people surrounded a bed where a fit young man, Ethan Cole, was thrashing violently against leather restraints. His skin was turning a terrifying shade of blue-gray. And there, at the head of the bed, was Mrs. Galloway. "Push another 4 milligrams of naloxone," Galloway shouted. Her voice shrill. "Why isn't he responding? Get me an intubation kit. He's seizing." "Stop!" Jocelyn's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. The entire room froze. Every head turned. Mrs. Galloway looked up, her glasses fogged. She blinked, recognizing the soaked woman standing in the doorway. "To you? The applicant? What on earth are you doing here? Security! Get this woman out of my trauma bay immediately. If you push that naloxone, he dies in 30 seconds, Jocelyn said, walking forward. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She spoke with the absolute certainty of someone who had seen death 1,000 times. "Excuse me?" Galloway sputtered, her face flushing red. "I told you to leave. This is a secure area." 2 hospital security guards grabbed Jocelyn's arms. "Get your hands off her," Corporal Banks barked, stepping forward and placing his hand on his holstered sidearm. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "She is operating under DOD jurisdiction." Galloway looked at the Marine, then at Jocelyn. "This is insane. I'm calling the police." "He doesn't have an opioid overdose, Mrs. Galloway," Jocelyn said, shaking off the guards and stepping up to the bed. She looked at Ethan's eyes. Pinpoints. She smelled his breath, almonds and ammonia. Look at the fasciculations in his neck muscles. Look at the salivation. It's a nerve agent. Specifically, a synthetic sarin derivative. "Nerve agent?" Galloway scoffed. "In Boston? Don't be ridiculous. He's a tourist who partied too hard. He is a Navy SEAL," Jocelyn snapped, "and he was targeted. Now step away from the patient. I will do no such thing." Galloway blocked the IV port. "You are an unlicensed, unverified applicant who I rejected for good reason. You are delusional." Suddenly the monitors shrieked. A flat, solid tone. "Vifib," a nurse yelled. "We're losing him." "Code blue," Galloway screamed. "Charging paddles clear." "No," Jocelyn shoved Galloway aside with a strength that shocked the older woman. "Paddles won't work. The heart is paralyzed by the toxin. You're cooking his heart muscle." Jocelyn ripped open the tactical bag she had brought. She pulled out 2 auto-injectors that looked nothing like civilian medical equipment. "Security! Arrest her!" Galloway shrieked, scrambling back up. "She's assaulting me!" The guards lunged. "Banks!" Jocelyn yelled, not looking up as she located the injection site on Ethan's thigh. Corporal Banks moved. He didn't draw his weapon, but he physically placed himself between the guards and Jocelyn, acting as a human wall. "Let her work!" Jocelyn slammed the first injector into Ethan's thigh. Atropine. She waited 2 seconds, then slammed the second one. Pralidoxim chloride. Then she grabbed a syringe from her kit, filled with a clear liquid, diazepam, and injected it directly into his IV line. "What did you just do?" Galloway gasped, horrified. "You just killed him!" The room went silent. The flatline tone on the monitor droned on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. "Come on, sailor," Jocelyn whispered, her hand on Ethan's chest. "Come back to the fight." Beep. The room flinched. Beep. Beep. The rhythm returned, slow at first, then strengthening. The violent thrashing stopped. Ethan's chest heaved, a deep, ragged breath on his own. The blue color in his face began to recede, replaced by a flush of pink. Jocelyn didn't smile. She just checked his pulse. Heart rate stabilizing. O2 sats rising to 92%. He's clearing the toxin. She turned slowly to look at Mrs. Galloway. The department head was standing with her mouth open, her face pale as a sheet. The other nurses were staring at Jocelyn with a mixture of awe and fear. "You were treating the wrong symptoms," Jocelyn said quietly. "You were looking for a junkie. You should have been looking for a soldier." Just then, the double doors swung open again. This time it wasn't a nurse. It was the hospital administrator, followed by two men in dark suits and earpieces. One of them held a phone out. "Mrs. Galloway," the administrator said, looking terrified. I have the Secretary of Defense on the line. He wants to know why you are obstructing his lead medical asset." Galloway looked at the phone, then at Jocelyn, the woman she had dismissed as unqualified less than an hour ago. Jocelyn wiped the rain from her forehead. "Tell him Whiskey 1 is on site. The asset is stable." The silence in the trauma bay was heavier than lead. The beep of Ethan Cole's heart monitor, now strong and rhythmic, was the only sound in the room. Dr. Patricia Galloway stood frozen near the crash cart, her hands trembling slightly. For 20 years, she had been the queen of this emergency room. She was the one who decided who was competent and who wasn't. She was the gatekeeper, and in the span of 5 minutes, her entire world had been dismantled by a woman she had dismissed as unqualified just an hour prior. The hospital administrator, a tall, nervous man named Mr. Sterling. Wait, Sterling is on the avoid list. Correction, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson wiped sweat from his upper lip as he lowered the phone. He looked at Galloway with a gaze that promised retribution. "Dr. Galloway," Henderson said, his voice tight. "Please step into the hallway, now." I was following protocol," Galloway stammered, her eyes darting between the armed agents and Jocelyn. She had a gap in her résumé. She had no references. How was I supposed to know she was this? Jocelyn ignored them. She was busy checking Ethan's pupillary response. She peeled off her gloves, her hands steady, her demeanor shifting from combat medic back to the quiet professional. "His core temp is rising," Jocelyn said to a stunned resident nurse. "Start a cooling blanket. Keep him on the drip for another hour. If his heart rate drops below 60, call me. I'll be outside." "Yes, ma'am," the nurse said, her eyes wide with respect. She didn't look at Dr. Galloway for permission. She looked at Jocelyn. Jocelyn walked out of the trauma bay. In the hallway, the scene was surreal. The waiting room had been cleared. Armed military police were stationed at the elevators. Dr. Galloway was backed against the wall by Mr. Henderson. "You rejected her," Henderson hissed, not caring who heard. "I just got off the phone with the Pentagon, Patricia. Do you know who that woman is? That is the nurse who ran the field hospital during the siege of Marja. She has a Navy Cross, and you told her she wasn't good enough for St. Andrews because she didn't have references? She didn't tell me," Galloway cried defensively. "She just sat there. She should have said something." "She signed a non-disclosure agreement, you fool," Henderson shouted. "She couldn't tell you. That's why you look at the skills, not just the paper. You almost let a national hero die because you were too arrogant to listen to someone who didn't go to an Ivy League school." Jocelyn walked past them. She stopped. She looked tired. The adrenaline was fading, and the exhaustion of the day, the rejection, the rain, the traffic, the saving of a life, was crashing down on her. She looked at Galloway. There was no hate in her eyes, just a profound pity. "I didn't need you to know who I was, Mrs. Galloway," Jocelyn said softly. "I just needed you to give me a chance to do the job I was born to do. You saw a gap in a resume. I saw a life that needed saving. That's the difference between a bureaucrat and a nurse." Galloway opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but no words came out. The shame was absolute. "Miss Miller," Henderson stepped forward, his tone completely different, saccharine and desperate. "Miss Miller, please accept my deepest apologies. This was a catastrophic misunderstanding. St. Andrews would be honored to have you. In fact, I can offer you the head trauma nurse position immediately. Double the salary we discussed. Signing bonus. Anything you want." Jocelyn looked at the man. She saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't offering her the job because he respected her. He was offering it because he was terrified of the bad press. He was afraid of the general. "Mr. Henderson," Jocelyn said, hoisting her cheap leather bag onto her shoulder, "an hour ago I was begging for a minimum wage spot. Now I'm worth double? My skills haven't changed in the last hour. Only your fear has." She shook her head. "I don't want your job. I don't want to work for people who need a 4-star general to call them before they treat a human being with respect." She turned to walk away, intending to leave the hospital and return to her Honda Civic. "Whiskey," the voice came from the trauma bay. It was weak, raspy, but undeniable. Jocelyn froze. She turned back. Standing in the doorway of the trauma room, leaning heavily against the doorframe, was Ethan Cole. He had ripped the IV tape loose, though the line was still in. He was pale, shaking, and wearing only a hospital gown, but he was standing. "Sir, get back in bed!" a nurse shouted, running toward him. Ethan held up a hand to stop her. His intense green eyes locked onto Jocelyn. "You left before I could say thank you," he wheezed. Jocelyn walked back toward him, ignoring Henderson and Galloway. She gently took his arm to support him. "You shouldn't be standing, Lieutenant Commander. The atropine is still in your system. You're going to be dizzy." "I've had worse hangovers." Ethan managed a weak grin. He looked at her, really looked at her. "I heard your voice. In the dark, you said, 'Come back to the fight.' I haven't heard a voice like that since I was in the sandbox." "I was just doing my job," Jocelyn said. "No," Ethan shook his head. "I heard them. The other doctors. They were losing me. You brought me back." The elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged. A group of men in dress blues walked out. Leading them was General Thomas Halloway. The hallway went silent. Even Mr. Henderson stopped breathing. General Halloway walked straight up to Jocelyn and Ethan. He looked at the lieutenant commander, then at the nurse who was holding him up. "At ease, Ethan," Halloway said gently. "Get back in that bed before you fall over." "Yes, General," Ethan murmured, allowing Jocelyn to guide him back towards the gurney. Halloway turned to Jocelyn. He didn't offer a handshake. Instead, slowly and deliberately, the 4-star general stood at attention and saluted her. It was a gesture that made the hospital staff gasp. A general saluting a civilian? "Mission accomplished, Whiskey 1, Halloway said. "But we're not done yet." 3 days later, the rain had cleared, leaving Boston under a crisp, bright blue sky. But Jocelyn wasn't enjoying the weather. She was in her small apartment, packing boxes. After the incident at the hospital, the media had gotten wind of something, though the military had scrubbed the details. Still, she felt restless. The adrenaline dump had left her feeling empty. She was back to square one. No job. Bills piling up. Her phone rang. It wasn't a restricted number this time. It was a local number. "Hello? Is this the woman who saves lives and refuses paychecks?" Jocelyn recognized the voice instantly. The gravel was gone, replaced by a smooth, charismatic baritone. It was Ethan Cole. "Lieutenant Commander," she said, leaning against a stack of books. "I didn't refuse a paycheck. I refused a bribe from a terrified administrator. There's a difference." Ethan chuckled. "Fair enough. Look, I'm being discharged today. The doctors here, the new ones, not Galloway, say I'm fit to travel. But I have a problem." "What's that?" "My family. They're protective. My mother is flying in from Virginia, and she's terrified. She doesn't trust the doctors here anymore. She wants me to have private medical supervision while I recover at the family estate for the next month. I told her there's only one person I trust to make sure my heart doesn't stop again." Jocelyn paused. "Ethan, I'm a trauma nurse, not a babysitter for rich officers." "I'm not asking for a babysitter, Jocelyn." Ethan's voice turned serious. "I'm asking for a partner. I have things I need to do, things related to why I was targeted. I can't do it alone. I need someone who can watch my back and patch me up if things go sideways. General Halloway approved the budget. It's a private contract. A contract? 6 months, full salary, plus hazard pay, and I checked your car in the parking lot that night, Jocelyn. We're throwing in a new truck. That Honda is a death trap." Jocelyn laughed, despite herself. "You inspected my car while you were dying? I'm a SEAL. We notice details. Please, I'm outside." Jocelyn walked to her window and looked down at the street. There, parked in front of her run-down apartment building, was a sleek, black Range Rover. Leaning against it, wearing jeans and a black leather jacket, looked Ethan Cole. He looked healthy, strong, and undeniably handsome. He was holding a coffee cup up in a toast toward her window. Jocelyn felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just duty, it was excitement. She grabbed her jacket. She grabbed her bag. She ran down the stairs and out the front door. Ethan pushed off the car and smiled. "So, do we have a deal, Whiskey?" "One condition," Jocelyn said, crossing her arms. "Name it. If we get shot at, I drive." Ethan grinned, opening the passenger door for her. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As they drove off, Jocelyn looked in the rear-view mirror. She saw her old life, the struggle, the rejections, the lonely apartment, fading into the distance. She wasn't running away. She was deploying, but the story wasn't over. As they turned the corner, neither of them noticed a grey sedan pull out from the side street, following 2 cars behind. The driver of the sedan picked up a phone. "Target is on the move," the driver said, "and he has the nurse with him." "Good," a distorted voice replied on the other end. "She interfered once. Let's see if she can stop what's coming next. Eliminate them both." Interstate 95, North, Massachusetts, New Hampshire border, 16 o'clock hours. The silence inside the armored Range Rover was not empty. It was heavy, filled with the unspoken weight of what they had just left behind, and the uncertainty of where they were going. Outside, the New England autumn was in full riot. Trees lining the highway were exploding in shades of burnt orange, crimson, and dying gold, a scenic backdrop that felt almost mocking compared to the tension inside the cabin. Jocelyn Miller drove with her hands at 10 and 2, her knuckles pale against the heated leather steering wheel. To a casual observer passing them in the left lane, she looked like a focused driver navigating rush-hour traffic. But Jocelyn wasn't just driving. She was scanning. Her eyes moved in a relentless, practiced diamond pattern. Rear-view mirror, side mirror, instrument cluster, road ahead, repeat. It was a rhythm drilled into her brain during 18 months of convoy duty in the dusty, IED-littered supply routes of Helmand Province. You didn't look at the scenery. You looked for the anomaly. You looked for the pile of trash that was too new, the bystander who wasn't watching the road, the car that stayed in your blind spot for 3 seconds too long. Beside her, Lieutenant Commander Ethan Cole was trying to mask his condition. He sat reclined in the passenger seat, his head resting against the window. The synthetic sarin derivative, even though neutralized by Jocelyn's quick thinking, had left his nervous system raw. His hands, usually steady enough to thread a needle at 300 yards, were trembling in his lap. Every few minutes, a muscle in his jaw would twitch involuntarily. He was watching her. Through half-closed eyelids, Ethan studied the woman who had pulled him back from the abyss. He noticed the way she didn't just look at the mirrors. She analyzed them. He saw how she kept a calculated distance from the semi-truck ahead, leaving herself exactly enough room to swerve into the breakdown lane, if necessary. "You're doing it again," Ethan murmured, his voice raspy. The toxins had scorched his throat. Jocelyn didn't look at him. Her eyes flicked to the side mirror. Doing what? Clearing sectors, Ethan said, a faint smile touching his lips. You're driving a $90,000 luxury SUV on a civilian highway, but you're treating it like we're in a soft-skin Humvee in Fallujah. Jocelyn exhaled, her grip on the wheel loosening slightly, though her eyes never stopped moving. Old habits die hard, Commander. Besides, you're a high-value target. Someone tried to kill you with a binary nerve agent in a public hotel. I doubt they're just going to give up because you checked out of the hospital. Ethan shifted, wincing as the movement triggered a spike of nausea. You can call me Ethan, you know. I think you earned that right when you stuck a needle in my heart. Thigh, Jocelyn corrected automatically. I stuck it in your thigh, and I'm not dropping my guard until we're behind the gate of this safe house you promised. It's secure, Ethan promised. My family has owned the estate in Maine since the 1920s. It's on a cliff, one way in, one way out. Private security detail is already on site. Good, Jocelyn said, because we have a tail. The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Ethan's eyes snapped open, the haze of illness vanishing behind a wall of adrenaline. He didn't turn around immediately. That was rookie behavior. Instead, he adjusted the visor to look into the vanity mirror. Talk to me, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a command frequency. Grey sedan, Ford Taurus, late model. No front plate, Jocelyn recited calmly, though her heart rate began to climb. He picked us up at the toll booth 5 miles back. He's been floating 3 cars back in the middle lane. Every time I change speed, he matches. I moved to the right lane to let a truck pass, and he slowed down to stay behind it. He's masking his profile. Ethan watched the mirror. He saw the grey car. It was nondescript, the kind of vehicle that disappeared into the background. Law enforcement? No, Jocelyn said. Windows are tinted way past the legal limit for mass state troopers, and he's driving too aggressively. He's crowding the bumper of the Honda in front of him. He's impatient. Is he alone? I can't see the driver. But Jocelyn's eyes narrowed as she checked the left side mirror. There's a black SUV, Chevy Tahoe. It's been pacing us in the fast lane for 2 miles. It hasn't passed. A pincer, Ethan cursed softly. He reached under his seat, his fingers wrapped around the cold steel of a Sig Sauer P226 Legion. He pulled it out, checking the chamber with a metallic clack. We're being boxed in. The bridge, Jocelyn said, her mind racing ahead to the geography of the road. The Piscataqua River Bridge. It's 2 miles up. It's a choke point. High walls, no breakdown lane, nowhere to turn. If they're going to hit us, they'll do it there. Ethan tried to lift the gun, but his hand shook violently. The tremors were worse than he thought. He couldn't hold a sight picture. He cursed again, a harsh, guttural sound. I'm no good, Joss. I can't steady the aim. The ataxia is still messing with my fine motor skills. Then you talk, Jocelyn said, her voice turning steel hard. I drive, you call the play. We can't let them pin us on the bridge, Ethan said, forcing his brain to work through the fog. If we get stuck in traffic on that span, we're sitting ducks. They'll dismantle us. Traffic is thinning, Jocelyn noted. We're coming up on the approach. The Tahoe is speeding up. He's going to cut us off, Ethan realized. He's going to brake check us to force a stop, and the Taurus is going to come up form behind to finish the job. It's a classic cartel ambush. Not today, Jocelyn whispered. She slammed her foot down. The Range Rover's V8 engine roared, a guttural growl that vibrated through the chassis. Instead of slowing down as the Tahoe tried to merge in front of them, Jocelyn accelerated. The driver of the Tahoe, caught off guard by the sudden aggression, swerved slightly. Jocelyn didn't flinch. She held the heavy SUV steady, closing the gap until she was inches from the Tahoe's rear bumper. Joss, what are you doing? Ethan shouted, bracing his hand against the dashboard. Creating a hole, she yelled back. She jerked the wheel to the right, undertaking the Tahoe on the inside lane, forcing the grey Taurus behind them to slam on its brakes to avoid a collision. The Range Rover surged forward, hitting 80 and 90 miles per hour. "They're engaging!" Ethan yelled. The rear window of the Tahoe rolled down. A figure in black tactical gear leaned out, the distinct silhouette of a suppressed MP5 submachine gun visible against the skyline. Thwip, thwip, thwip. The sound of bullets impacting the car was terrifyingly loud. The rear windshield of the Range Rover spider-webbed instantly, shards of safety glass raining down into the cargo area. "Get down!" Ethan screamed, throwing his arm across Jocelyn to shield her, ignoring his own safety. "I can't drive if I'm down, man," Jocelyn shouted, ducking her head but keeping her eyes on the road. The bridge was looming ahead, a massive steel arch rising over the water. The grey Taurus had recovered and was now screaming up on their left side. They were trying to bracket the Range Rover again. "They're trying to blow the tires," Ethan assessed. "If we hit the bridge deck with a blown tire, we flip." Jocelyn's mind flashed back to 2018. A dusty road outside Aleppo. A convoy under fire. The rule was simple. Momentum is life. "Hold on," Jocelyn said. Her voice wasn't panicked. It was eerily calm. It was the voice of Whiskey 1. She waited until the grey Taurus was perfectly parallel with her rear wheel. The driver of the Taurus was edging closer, trying to get the angle for a shot into the cabin. Jocelyn checked the mirror. She calculated the physics. The Range Rover weighed nearly 3 tons. The Taurus weighed less than 2. "Pit maneuver?" Ethan asked, seeing her intent. "No," Jocelyn said. "Battering ram!" She wrenched the steering wheel hard to the left. The impact was bone-jarring. The heavy steel frame of the armoured Range Rover slammed into the side of the Taurus with the force of a freight train. Metal screamed against metal, a high-pitched shriek that drowned out the wind. The Taurus stood no chance. The impact sent it careening sideways. It spun out of control, tires smoking as they lost traction. The car pirouetted across the highway, slamming violently into the concrete median barrier. The hood crumpled like aluminum foil, and the car came to a steaming halt, blocking the left lane. "One down!" Ethan yelled, the adrenaline temporarily steadying his hands. "But the Tahoe is still on us!" The black Chevy Tahoe was heavier, and the men inside were professionals. They didn't stop for their fallen comrades. They accelerated, coming up directly behind Jocelyn, their grille filling the rear-view mirror. They were on the bridge now. The water was 200 feet below. The road narrowed. "He's going to ram us!" Jocelyn shouted. The Tahoe surged forward, bumping the rear of the Range Rover. The jolt snapped their heads back. Jocelyn fought the steering wheel as the SUV fishtailed. "He's trying to spin us out!" Jocelyn gritted her teeth, her forearms burning with the effort to keep the car straight. "Brake check him," Ethan commanded. "No, he has a brush guard on the front. He'll crush the radiator," Jocelyn countered. "I need to get behind him." "How? He's glued to your 6. Jocelyn saw the off-ramp for the Portsmouth exit coming up on the right, just at the end of the bridge. It was a sharp, tight curve. "Trust me?" she asked Ethan. Ethan looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire he had seen in the trauma bay when she defied the hospital administration to save his life. "With my life," he said. Jocelyn didn't slow down. She kept the speed at 90. The Tahoe stayed right with her. They were rushing towards the exit ramp, but they were in the far left lane. "You're going to miss the exit," Ethan warned. "Wait for it," Jocelyn whispered. She waited until they were parallel with the gore point, the triangle of painted lines separating the highway from the exit. "Now!" Jocelyn slammed the brakes, locking them up for a split second to transfer the weight of the car forward, then ripped the emergency brake while spinning the wheel hard to the right. The Range Rover drifted. It was a chaotic, violent slide. The tires screamed in protest, burning rubber thick and white. The heavy SUV slid diagonally across 3 lanes of traffic, narrowly missing a terrified family in a minivan. The Tahoe, expecting a straight chase, couldn't react in time. The driver slammed on his brakes, but momentum carried him forward. He shot past them, unable to make the turn, continuing straight down the highway. Jocelyn released the handbrake, stomped on the gas, and corrected the slide. The Range Rover bucked, found traction, and shot down the exit ramp, leaving the Tahoe screeching helplessly on the bridge above them. They tore down the secondary road, putting distance between themselves and the highway. Jocelyn took 3 random turns, winding through the back roads of New Hampshire, checking the mirrors constantly. Empty. Only the falling leaves and the quiet road behind them. 5 minutes passed in silence. The only sound was the wind whistling through the shattered rear window and the heavy breathing of 2 people who had just cheated death. Jocelyn's hands began to shake. The adrenaline was dumping, leaving her cold and trembling. She pulled the car over onto a gravel shoulder near a dense patch of pine trees. She put the car in park and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, her chest heaving. Ethan watched her. He saw the transition. The warrior was receding, and the woman was returning. He saw the cracks in the armor. "Status?" Ethan asked softly. Jocelyn took a shuddering breath. "Vehicle is damaged. Rear glass gone. Left fender crumpled. But engine temp is stable. Tires are holding pressure." "I wasn't asking about the car," Ethan said. He reached over and placed his hand on hers. His hand was still trembling from the nerve agent, and her hand was trembling from the shock. Together, their vibrations seemed to cancel each other out, finding a stillness in the connection. "I'm okay," Jocelyn whispered. I haven't had to drive like that since 2018. I thought I left that part of me in the desert." "You can't leave it behind," Ethan said gently. "It's part of who you are, and thank God for it. Most people would have frozen on that bridge." "You didn't flinch." Jocelyn turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright, unshed tears of adrenaline shimmering in them. "Who are they, Ethan? Those weren't street thugs. That was a coordinated hit." "Mercenaries," Ethan said darkly. "Private military contractors. High-end. The kind that don't leave a paper trail. Someone paid a lot of money to make sure I didn't make it to Maine." "Why?" "Because of what I know," Ethan said. "And now, because you saved me, you're a target too. I'm sorry, Joss. I dragged you into this." Jocelyn looked at his hand covering hers. She thought about her empty apartment, the stack of unpaid bills, the rejection letter from St. Andrews, the feeling of being useless, of being invisible. Then she looked at the shattered window and the man beside her who was alive only because of her skill. "Don't be sorry," she said, her voice strengthening. "For the first time in 4 years, I feel like I'm awake." She put the car back in drive. "Now tell me where this safe house is. I need a drink." The coast of Maine. 1845 hours. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and deep indigo by the time they reached the gate. The coal estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. It sat on a rocky promontory overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, the waves crashing violently against the jagged cliffs 200 feet below. Jocelyn pulled the battered Range Rover up to the wrought iron gates. A camera buzzed and rotated to focus on them. A moment later, the gates swung open silently. They drove up the winding driveway, flanked by ancient oak trees. The house itself was massive, a stone structure that looked like it had weathered 1,000 storms. As they parked in the circular driveway, the front door opened. 2 men in suits walked out, flanked by a woman who looked like royalty. She was older, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, but her eyes were the same piercing green as Ethan's. "Mother," Ethan sighed as he opened the car door, stumbling slightly. The woman ran down the steps, ignoring the shattered glass and the dented fender. She grabbed Ethan's face in her hands, checking him frantically. "Ethan, my God, look at you!" she cried. The security team said there was an incident on the highway. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mum," Ethan said, gently pulling away but keeping an arm around her. "I'm alive." He turned and gestured to the driver's side. Jocelyn had stepped out, looking out of place in her wet, wrinkled clothes from the hospital, standing next to the ruined luxury SUV. "Mum," Ethan said, his voice ringing with pride, This is Jocelyn Miller. She's the one who restarted my heart at St. Andrews, and she's the only reason I'm standing here right now, instead of being scraped off the I-95 bridge." Ethan's mother froze. She looked at Jocelyn. The patrician arrogance melted away, replaced by a raw, overwhelming gratitude. She walked over to Jocelyn and, to everyone's surprise, pulled the nurse into a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered into Jocelyn's ear. "Thank you for giving me my son back." Jocelyn stood stiffly for a moment, then relaxed, patting the woman's back. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Later that night, after the debriefing with the private security team and a meal that tasted like heaven after the chaos of the day, Jocelyn found herself standing on the massive stone balcony overlooking the ocean. The wind was cold, biting through her thin jacket. She heard footsteps behind her. "Here," Ethan said. He draped a heavy wool coat over her shoulders. It smelled of cedar and expensive cologne. "Thanks," she said, pulling it tight. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the moonlight dance on the black water. "My mother wants to pay you double the contract rate," Ethan said, leaning on the railing next to her. "She says you're underpaid." "Your mother is very generous," Jocelyn said, "but I'm not doing this for the money." "I know," Ethan said. He turned to face her. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked healthier now, the food and rest having chased away the worst of the tremors. "You're doing it because you can't walk away from a fight." "Maybe," Jocelyn admitted. "Or maybe I'm just tired of being told I'm not qualified." Ethan laughed, a low, warm sound. "You know, when Galloway kicked you out of that office, she said you had blank years. She said you were empty." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Jocelyn's ear. His fingers lingered for a second longer than necessary. "She was wrong," Ethan whispered. "You aren't empty, Jocelyn. You're the most complete person I've ever met." Jocelyn looked up at him. The air between them crackled, charged with the electricity of survival and something else, something new and terrifying and wonderful. "We have a lot of work to do, Ethan," she said softly. "Whoever sent that hit team, they aren't going to stop." "Let them come," Ethan said, looking out at the dark horizon. "They messed with the wrong SEAL, and they definitely messed with the wrong nurse." He turned back to her, his expression hardening into resolve. "Tomorrow, we go on the offensive. We find out who signed the order, and we take them down. Are you with me, Whiskey One?" Jocelyn Miller smiled. It wasn't the polite smile of a job applicant. It was the wolfish grin of a predator who had finally found her pack. "All the way, Commander," she said. "All the way." Jocelyn Miller walked into that hospital looking for a paycheck, but she walked out with a purpose. They judged her by a piece of paper, but she proved her worth with action. In a world that is obsessed with titles and resumes, sometimes the most valuable people are the ones who have been through the fire and came out the other side, silent, humble, and dangerous. Jocelyn and Ethan's fight is just beginning, and the people who tried to silence them have no idea what they've just unleashed. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It helps the channel so much, and lets me know you want to see part 2 of Jocelyn and Ethan's mission. Have you ever been rejected from a job you knew you were perfect for? Let me know your story in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode where we find out who ordered the hit on the commander. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.